Good morning, T24 mathematicians. Welcome to another STAR Prep class. Please open your yellow workbooks to page 39. The material we're covering today is the same that you are learning in your algebra classes, so this will be very familiar to you. One thing to note is that the papers that are printed in your workbook for today's lesson have a typo. Everywhere where there is supposed to be an exponent, the number was written as a regular 2. So let's go ahead and correct that right now. It's x squared plus 8x plus 7. And since we're also solving, we're not just factoring, put an equals 0 at the end. So example 2 is x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals 0. Example 3 is x squared minus 10x plus 9 equals 0. Example 4 is x squared minus 7x minus 18 equals 0. 2x squared minus 2x minus 4 equals 0. 4x squared minus 4x minus 8 equals 0. All right, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get started on example 1. Remember, we have a trinomial here. That's 3 terms. We need to factor it. So how do we factor a trinomial? I hope that you just thought of having 2 parentheses here. By the way, since you guys are mathematicians at this point, you've sat through over a semester of algebra, when you see something like this, you shouldn't just be seeing a random jumble of letters and numbers. That's what an average person on the street would see. You're supposed to, at this point in your life, be able to identify that that will at some point look like a quadratic function. We don't know where it's going to be on the graph yet, but you know because it has that exponent 2 and it's written in this trinomial form, that's going to be a parabola. So hopefully at this point as you're moving along, you're starting to visualize exactly what we're doing when we're doing this math. If not, you need to be concerting your effort to be following along as you're doing that. What that probably signifies, if you're not recognizing these things, is that you are in the mode of just copying down what the teacher writes, and that is not good for developing your problem-solving skills and recognizing what forms and things like that. All right, back to where we were. We have our 2 parentheses. What do we have to multiply by itself to get x squared? That would be an x and an x. And then we go through the process of thinking what 2 numbers multiply to give me 7 and add to give me 8. So if we have to, we come over to the side and we list our factors of 7, which are easy because there are only 2, just one pair of factors, 2 numbers, 1 and 7. So we put it in and we see that since it's a positive 7, 1 times 7 is 7 and 1 plus 7 is 8, they're both positive. And that's equal to 0. Now we have to solve to find out what the solutions are. Since we know the answer is equal to 0, if this one is equal to 0, it doesn't matter what this over here is because 0 times anything is 0. And we can apply the same logic for the other one. If this one is equal to 0, it wouldn't matter what this one is because 0 times anything is 0. So in order to solve, we set each one equal to 0. X plus 1 can be equal to 0, and you don't need those parentheses there. You can write them or not. It's up to you. And x plus 7 is equal to 0. Now we want the x on its own. How do I get rid of that plus 1? If you just thought minus 1, you are correct. X is equal to negative 1. How do I get rid of that plus 7? If you're just sitting there and you're not thinking the answers to the questions, you are not doing what you're supposed to do. Think. If you said minus 7, you are correct. Very simple. X is equal to negative 7. So we have our answer, which now we know exactly where our parabola would be. One of the solutions is at negative 1, and the other one's at negative 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. and so we could draw our parabola, an estimate of it right there. That's what we're solving on every single one of these. We've given you an equation, a quadratic, and you are trying to find what the two solutions, the roots, the zeros, we can call it any of those names, what they're called. All right, let's look at example 2. What do we need to do first? You should have just thought about drawing the parentheses and putting an x there to give us x squared. What two numbers multiply to give us 12 and add to give us 4. So you could list your factors if you need to. 1 and 12, 2 and 6. Can you think of any others? Hopefully you thought of 3 and 4. And we note, since the 12 is negative, we know one of the two pairs is going to be negative. We don't know which, but we know they can't both be negative. Otherwise, a negative times a negative would give us a positive. So as we're looking to see which one's going to give us a positive 4, we want to see what the difference is between them, because one's positive, one's negative. It'll be like they're subtracting. The difference between 1 and 12 is 11. That's not what we want. 2 and 6 does have a difference of 4, so that works out. 3 and 4 only has a difference of 1. So now the question is, which one is negative, the 2 or the 6? We want it to add to give us a positive 4. Well, hopefully you thought that the 2 needs to be negative so that when it cancels, the positive 6 has 4 left over. So it's minus 2 plus 6 equals 0. Since we're solving, if we were just factoring a trinomial, we could leave it there. But since we're solving, we need to set both of them equal to 0. X plus 6 is equal to 0. How do we get rid of the minus 2? Plus 2, x is equal to 2. How do we get rid of the plus 6? Minus 6, x is equal to negative 6. All right, let's try example 3. Parentheses, x, x. What are the factors of 9? 1 and 9, 3 and 3. Which ones would add to give us a negative? So notice it's a positive 9, but it's a negative. So they can't both be positive, because when I add, that would give me a positive in the middle. So they both have to be negative in this case. So that when I add it, a negative and a negative, when I add it, stays negative. So which one of these two pairs, 3 and 3 or 1 and 9, give us 10? Hopefully you thought that the negative 1 and the negative 9 would. Set each one equal to 0. At this point, since you're such smart students, you're probably getting to the point where you think, I hate this step where I'm just writing it. I can just see with my own eyes that it's going to end up being x equals positive 1, and this one ends up being x equals positive 9. And that's good if you're catching on to that, but we're going to solve every time all the way through. Plus 1 gets rid of that. X equals 1, just like we anticipated. Plus 9 to get it to the other side. X is equal to 9. All right, example 4. Parentheses, parentheses. X, x. Multiplies to give me negative 18. Adds to give me 7. What are the factors of 18? 1 and 18. Can you think of any others? 3 and 6, hopefully you said. 2 and 9. Since it's negative, we know at least one of them is going to be negative, and they can't both be, because a negative times a negative would give us a positive. So one of them is negative, and we're going to add to get negative 7, so that means the difference between the two needs to be 7. That's got a difference of 17. That's got a difference of 3, so it's got to be 2 and 9. Which one has to be negative so that when we add it, it's a negative 7? Hopefully you thought that the 9 should be negative. Set them equal to 0. X plus 2 is equal to 0. X minus 9 is equal to 0. Minus 2. X is equal to negative 2. Plus 9. X is equal to 9. All right. Now we're finally getting into some good stuff. We have a leading coefficient. Do you remember what to do when you have a leading coefficient? Well, on a leading coefficient, we've learned several ways in class. Excuse me, that's my phone. Okay, so the two methods that we use primarily are either guess and check or slide, divide, slide. I'll start this one off with guess and check. We have the parentheses. It's not just x squared. We know that to be x squared, it would at least have to have an x and an x in the front. But how would we get that 2? Well, one of them would have to be a 2. 2x times x is 2x squared, so that's no problem. We still list our factors of 4. In this case, we have 1 and 4, 2 and 2. However, at this point, we know because the 2 is there, it's going to throw off our math in some. And so this is where the guessing and checking comes in. We take our factors and we just put them in and see if it comes out in our brain. And so this is why we use pencil and math, so we can do this sort of thing. So 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times x is 1. So 8 and 1, either if I added it or subtracted it, it wouldn't give me 2. So that's not correct. So then I simply try it the other way around. 4 and 1. 2 times 1 is 2. 4 times 1 is 4. Well, now there we go. We have 4 and 2, and I have a negative 2. So if I were to make one of them a negative and one a positive, that would give me a negative 2. So that works out. So already in the guess and check, we have our answer. The 4 needs to be negative, and the 2 needs to be positive. The positive is in front of the 1 because 2 times 1 is 2. That's what gave it to us. All right, so now we have that figured out. We put equals 0, and so each one of them has to be equal to 0. 2x minus 4 is equal to 0, and x plus 1 is equal to 0. Plus 4 plus 4, 2x is equal to 4, and now here's where the extra step comes in. I have to get the x on its own. What's the 2 doing to the x? Well, any number next to a letter means multiply, so to get rid of it, we would divide by 2, divide by 2, x is equal to 2. All right, over here, back to an easy one. How do we get rid of the plus 1, minus 1, minus 1? X is equal to 1. Now, some of you got lost when we did the guess and check steps in red. That's why we've also taught you slide, divide, slide. So those of you that learned and can figure out the guess and check in your head as you're working through, fine. Those of you that just scratched your head in frustration and got lost, that's why you know how to do slide, divide, slide. So remember, slide. We take our leading coefficient, we slide it down to our last number, that 8. And what do we do with those two numbers? We multiply them. What's 4 times 8? And since we are not middle school students anymore, everyone in class knows exactly what 4 times 8 is. X squared minus 4x minus 32. That's the magic answer. All right, so now that we've slid it down and multiplied, we've done the slide step, so now it's in good form. We can do our factoring like we do every single time, x and x. What are the factors of 32? 32, well, you should at least know one pair of factors right now because we just multiplied 4 times 8 to get it, 4 and 8. There goes the computer. 4 and 8. What other factors are there? 2 and 16. Well, we could list and list and list, but we already see 4 and 8 has a difference of 4. Has a difference of 4. We know that that's going to be the pair we want. Since it's negative, one of them has to be negative, and since when we add it, we have -4 left over, we know the bigger number, -8, needs to be the negative one. -8 and 4. So we factored it the way we should. That was sliding. Now we have to do what step? Divide. What do we divide by? Hopefully you just thought that we're divide by whatever number we messed it up with to begin with. To begin with, we multiplied times 4 and changed the equation, so now we're bringing it back. Divide by 4, divide by 4. We reduce at this point if we can, so it's x. What is 8 divided by 4? I should have thought of 2, so it's x minus 2. And 4 over 4 is 1, that's correct. Plus 1. Now remember, if it doesn't reduce all the way, the last step is slide back again. So if there was something in the denominator, so for example, and this is fake, so don't get caught up on it, but if it had been x plus 3/2 and it didn't reduce, this last step of slide would be where you slide it back to the front and it becomes 2x plus 3. That didn't happen in this case, so there was nothing to do for the slide step. We already have it factored. Now we're moving into where we still have to solve. So what is this going to be? So it's x minus 2 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, plus 2, x is equal to 2, minus 1, x is equal to -1. So now we have solved all 6 of these examples. By the way, if you are an amazing student who noticed that we didn't have to do guess and check and slide, divide, slide on number 5 and 6, if you noticed that each of our numbers were divisible by the same thing, by 2, so we could factor out. You could have simplified your life. Knowing math helps simplify your life. So this would have been immediately 2x squared minus x minus 2, and that's factorable right there. So we would have gotten the same 2 factors that we got before. It would have been 2x minus 2 and x minus 1, which would have given us these same answers we had before. So that makes it a lot nicer when we're working our way through x plus 1. When we're working our way through. I put the wrong thing because evidently the minus didn't work on that one. All right, and the same thing was true for example 6. The leading coefficient, they were all divisible by the same number, 4 in fact. So if we had reverse factored and factored out a 4, we would have been left with an x squared minus x minus 2, and that's very easy to factor as well. It would have been x minus 2 and x plus 1. And the leading coefficient, when we do it that way, is factored out. You don't need to know that last part. If you saw it, then great. If you didn't see it, then don't worry about it. Use the methods that I showed. Those work all the time, whereas many times you cannot factor something out of a trinomial like that. All right, good luck and Godspeed.